Tonight I'd like to make a video in English about the anti-theocratic revolution that's taking place in Iran in the past few days. I think we all need to pay attention to it. It is important to see a Middle Eastern uprising with some factions denying all religions. A slew of different factors and small events jump-started the complex cascade of recent demonstrations and attacks in Iran. The main issue is the bad economy and the government's corruption and blatant lack of accountability despite much posture. Many have lost their bank savings and have not been paid salaries. There's rampant homelessness and prostitution, while the government just announced a budget of $1 billion for religious affairs just two weeks ago, and other silly purposes, all while the regime's revolutionary guard, the SEPAH, continues to spend money on missile tests and troops in Syria. It is quite hard to believe how much pain and suffering people of Iran have endured within the past few decades. Iranians have really failed to articulate their misery as they're too proud a nation. I'm going to include a bunch of links in the video description so you can refer to them. I think there's a lot that is missing in the Western media. The Western media, maybe they do not want to be fanning the fire. I'm not sure. Maybe because of the Christmas holidays and so forth. But also there's a sense that there's a leftist tendency that we don't want to get involved. But the problem is that people of Iran are not only complaining about low wages and money problems, but it's also there's massive corruption that has been reported widely. And it's well documented. These are not this is not fake news, and in fact, the government has over and over jailed its own people, and these people have come out and they have openly released videos. Like, for example, if you Google, there's no trace in English about the videos that Ahmadinejad released in the past 6 months. Basically talking about the corruptions that existed and the fact that he would name names and the fact that he has documents that he has secured elsewhere. In case he gets jailed, he's going to leak them. He has videos, he has audio recordings, it seems, and there's a lot of stuff, and it's not just one or two incidents. The government is doing massive deals all over. The embezzlement is extremely rampant, and I don't know why people like Jill Stein or the leftist types or RT News, they always want to just wrap it up as like, yeah, it's because of America's sanctions that people are angry and they don't have money and so forth. It's because Trump triggered it. That's not really it. There is this Rouhani, the new president, basically proved that he's a mouthpiece for Khamenei. In fact, 2 days ago when he came out and he talked, it was as if the Ayatollah had opened up his mouth and was talking. He basically proved that all his campaign promises were, untrue, and that he's just in the game like the rest of them. The set of the Iranians are a proud nation, so they really have not opened up, and they don't have an Al Jazeera. There's a shortage of a Persian, an Iranian news agency in English that can broadcast reliable news from Iran, like the Al Jazeera. Now, here's the set of smaller events that kindled the current revolution. A few years of small demonstrations, very peaceful, by Mohammadi Nourizad, an artist and a political figure, and Dr. Maliki, who was the ex-president of the University of Tehran, peacefully demanding the release of various political prisoners and an explanation for the mysterious deaths of good young men and women in jails, such as Sattar Beheshti. This has been going on for years now. B. The so-called restart revolution by semi-giddy, charismatic allegedly comic, popular ex-showman from the Islamic TV era in the 90s, named Sayyid Muhammad Hosseini, with thousands of followers, probably hundreds of thousands of followers, but probably a few thousand hardcore followers, who has crafted a strange ideology, a superficial and fallacious amalgam of Persian Sufi mysticism with what he believes to be ideas taken from Plato, Aristotle, Rumi, Cyrus the Great. It's a bizarre amalgam, and he never exactly expounds what is his philosophy. But he's charismatic and he's ambiguous, and that is apparently that is how he has succeeded gaining some popularity. He's against any known religion, but he's also against atheism. In early 2017, in his videos, he began to claim that the so-called supreme leader is dead, and but there have been other rumors to that effect, that or that his health is pretty bad, that the Ayatollah is in dire condition, and that there's also a double. There's another news that they have shown photos of two guys. One has a tiny difference in earlobe, that he has a double that goes around. Whatever that means, but there are some similarities between Hosseini himself and Trump, in the sense that they have both a whole past history of performing on TV, learning to be charismatic, and following their ratings. Hosseini might have also received financial aid from some Arab states, but that's not a big deal, and I don't think that's a bad thing. You need funding to have a video talk show. And, the ex-heir to the throne, Reza Pahlavi, received aid from Arab states for a few decades, to the point that this whole business of getting aid to overthrow the regime has become a business for some people. They make money, but I'm not against it. If they can encourage incite demonstrations or whatever and overthrow a brutal regime, I don't think that's a bad thing. At some point in early 2017, I think Hosseini began to ask his curious followers to attack various embassies and institutions owned by the IRI, Islamic Republic of Iran, inside and abroad, and post videos of themselves doing so, and people started doing that. An operation that later on expanded to attacks on Shiite mosques, banks, and ATM machines inside Iran. Based on Facebook posts, he seems to have a few 100,000 followers who somehow believe in his strange cocktail of philosophy, I should say. The regime's attack in the past decade on Sufi leaders and shrines made enough government enemies ready to be led this way. His social media account on Twitter was closed by Twitter a few days ago for inciting violence. I'm going to include some links and videos of attacks on mosques. The previous president, Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, who was utterly despised by a good portion of Iranians towards the end of his term, made a series of controversial video statements in the second half of 2017 containing veiled threats to the system, after his team was accused of certain financial discrepancies and embezzlement in 2015, and one of his close staff members, one of his confidants, Mr. Baghai, was even imprisoned in June 2015 with no clear charges. Ahmadinejad began publishing a series of homemade videos this year as it got worse and he himself was under attack. He made a bunch of videos speaking about the economic corruption and lavish spendings behind the scene, and the secrets that he could and would be revealing in the future when the time is ripe. And he made veiled references about certain members of the judiciary who have foreign citizenship. When he describes them one by one, you know he's talking about the Larijani brothers, a very corrupt group of people with billions of dollars that they've taken out, and they have foreign banks, Swiss bank accounts, and so forth. It's pretty known, and that's been well documented on VOA. And other people, although he did not name names, it was clear who he is targeting, and he made it very clear that he had made video recordings, and documents ready to be leaked in case he's arrested and tried. Even though Iranians do not like him much, they took his words as another proof for what they already know. Corruption and embezzlement are the main themes of this regime. D. A few years of Iranian and international support for Iranian women's stealthy freedom movement. Much data is available on the movement in English, so I just refer you to those. You can Google that. Very peaceful demonstrations for the past year by members of the working class, the blue collar, organized by their unofficial left-leaning unions protesting low wages and unpaid salaries. Also protests by people who had lost their CDs and bank savings and so forth to banks that were not paying them back, and the government did not seem to be doing anything. I think maybe Jeremy Corbyn should show some solidarity. All these communists too, they should show some solidarity for these poor working class people who are obviously suffering in Iran. I mean, it's just amazing how much pain and suffering these people. And this government should have collapsed 20 years ago. I don't know how they have managed to. Again, they made business out of. They have made business out of terrorism, and they were going to make nuclear weapons into another business too. And they've made business out of sending troops, Afghan soldiers, get them over to Syria, here, there, or other people, not just Afghans. Just make business out of sending and threatening and so forth. It's a dictators club, and Russia, North Korea, and at some point China, Iran, these guys were, taking care of each other. They want to make sure that a revolution in Syria does not succeed. They make sure that other revolutions do not succeed. And that's how they give everyone the impression that, okay, do not revolt against your rulers because, it doesn't go anywhere. Don't do it. But this time I think it is serious, and I think people of Iran have a responsibility for themselves and for the people of the world. I think Iranians were quiet for decades while their oil was being spent on terrorism. Iranians, as far as I'm concerned, by being quiet and being afraid for so many years, especially in the initial years of the revolution, they allowed this virus with many faces to evolve and to hold roots all over and to torture and create suffering all over the planet Earth. And I think they owe it to themselves. And if this revolution succeeds, and if Israelis and Americans and Saudis want to help with intelligence, with anything, I think it's welcome. Why not? And I think if the revolution succeeds, we need 1,000 engineers from America, from Iran, from all over. Volunteers even. We should become a global country. We should lead the country. We should provide security and safety, prevent terrorist attacks. Ask Israeli, Mossad, and Americans to come to America, train the Iranians, help Iranians prevent terrorism globally and inside Iran. Once you create security in Iran, then it's just a matter of building. Iran's problems are just engineering problems. Shortage of water, embezzlement. Once that goes away and you have a group of democratically held people that go through a cycle, they're not leaders and ayatollahs for decades and decades and decades. If they don't function, if they don't produce, they can be voted out of the system. Although these two, an F is speeches by President Trump and Mr. Netanyahu. Netanyahu has been making a few video statements addressing the people of Iran directly in the past few months. Although these two leaders are not viewed as having great report cards themselves, who does? Iranians do appreciate their help as the enemies of the enemies. G, the new Rouhani government practically proved they have no power in the presence of a powerful SEPAH, who is ruled, or more likely is ruling, a so-called supreme leader. People were forced in the last presidential elections to choose between the status quo Rouhani guy and a well-known government executioner. I mean, that was not really an open election. You were given two choices: status quo of this Rouhani guy, who is basically another virus, a face of a virus, a new permutation, pretending to be moderate, but it is far from it, and another guy who was known to be a brutal executioner and so forth. And that's not an open election. So people voted for this guy and nothing happened. There was still, women being brutalized, hijab was being enforced, embezzlement continued. Nothing really changed that much. There was no improvement in the economy or even basic freedom. The police cracked down on women without a hijab, and much of Rouhani's campaign promises are now viewed as silly lies. Even though Ayatollah Khamenei, this so-called supreme leader, has been a far less ruthless leader than the previous Ayatollah Khomeini, the founder of IRI, he has proven to be more micromanagerial as the late Shah was. He is despised by a good portion of Iranians. But then again, Iranians did not like the Shah. They liked the Ayatollah, then they hated him. They liked Khatami, the president, and then they hated him. They voted crazily for Ahmadinejad, and then they hated him. This Rouhani was a vote. It's just over and over. It's like people who have desperately tried to fall in love with someone, and their hearts have been broken over and over and over. And now there's way too many broken hearts. Inside Iran, outside Iran, all kinds of promises, all kinds of animosities. This country, this regime has made a lot of enemies, a lot of personal enemies. As you may or may not know, Khomeini was personally hurt by the Shah. He had a personal grudge because his land was confiscated. Shah had a reform program where he took land from a lot of massive landowners and gave it to the peasants. And Khomeini and his family lost a lot of land. They owned villages and villages. They lost it, and it was a personal vendetta that Khomeini had. And now this regime has done that to a lot of people. Supporting this religion, trying to be moderate with them or giving them a chance as Obama did, is really not understanding what these people are all about. The massive earthquake on the Iraq-Iran border showed the depth of the ineptitude of this regime. Gross underestimates of the number of people killed, which never rose above the first day estimates of about 147 people or such, despite over 10,000 housing units completely destroyed. People showed heroic sacrifice by surpassing the government and personally driving with carloads of clothing and blankets to the border town. There were rumors that the news of the earthquake did not reach Rouhani at night when it happened, and he and many top government officials were busy celebrating Rouhani's birthday at that night. Government grossly exaggerated the number of temporary plastic units that they were delivering to the affected areas. Many videos showed the poor building codes on the Iranian side had caused much more death than the Iraqi side, because they have given so many phony contracts to so many builders building terrible units in the past few decades. If there's ever an earthquake in Tehran, we have a massive disaster on our hands, because the building codes, they've just allowed anyone to build anything because they were making money out of it. ISIS seems defeated now for the most part, and people of Iran do not have a fear of this cult at their borders. The revolution, successful or not, this revolution of 2018, successful or not, seems to have a few commonalities with the 1979 revolution in Iran. The Shah's government was hopelessly trying to have an air of relative respect for human rights, just as the current regime has been forced to pretend somewhat. For example, Ambassador Javad Zarif's appearance on Charlie Rose and acting like a mouse. The current leader constitutes the Constitution. That's another similarity. The ruler is micromanaging everything, and he constitutes the Constitution of the law of the land in that country. He also likes to interfere with all aspects of the government. Small groups began violent attacks with Molotov cocktails, etc., breaking the impenetrable facade of a straw government. The It's exactly what happened in Iran in 1979. D, the regime has no friends inside or outside Iran, just like the Shah, sadly. The foreign powers, the US, Israel, Saudis, do not care for the regime. Or at least anymore. They have had it. China and Russia are letting go of this member of the dictator club, it seems. And North Korea is in hot waters itself. E, decades of grudges over disagreements, economy, political prisoners, torture, corruption, brutal attacks during past uprisings, and even the government's house arrest and execution of its own top-ranking loyal members year after year after year. The first president, Abul Hassan Bani Saad, had to flee the country. He's still in France, in exile. Qutbzadeh, another guy. See, when Khomeini came to Iran, he was like a virus. Viruses have a protein shell around them. When they come into the bacteria, they throw away the shell and they inject themselves into it and they start multiplying. This mullah came with a bunch of suit-wearing, tie-wearing people like Bani Saad, Qutbzadeh, Yazdi, and one by one, these people were either killed. Qutbzadeh was killed. I think Dan Rather was on the plane with him and Khomeini when they were going to Iran, and he felt emotional about Qutbzadeh getting killed. Yazdi was arrested for years in house arrest, and I think maybe was in jail actually, and he died, I think, recently in jail, if I'm not mistaken. Khatami, the other supposedly reformist, moderate president, he's been under house arrest, it seems, without actually openly saying it. No one had contact with him for years. No one could talk to him or hear him or anything. Mir Hossein Mousavi, another person who served this government for years. Hashemi, which there are rumors that obviously he was, I shouldn't say obviously, that he was killed. It was very interesting towards the end. He was talking about things, regretting a bunch of things. There are videos of him. And or Montazeh, Ayatollah Montazeh, a very good, nice and moderate mullah in the beginning of the, he was supposed to be replacing the Ayatollah Khomeini. He said, look, what we're doing, killing prisoners and so forth, this is not right. We're not having, our name is going in history, a bad name is going down in history. We need to do something about it. Again, there was an audio tape of his voice leaked, I think a year ago, about, or maybe more, that kind of raised a lot of eyebrows, basically, that this poor guy was complaining to you guys and you washed him away, put him under house arrest. He died under house arrest. They attacked his home. He died under house arrest finally, and now here's an audio tape of this guy and what he was saying about the brutal hammering of political dissent in Iran. So all of this has made a lot of Iranians say enough is enough, and that's exactly what happened in 1979 also. There's an obvious absence of a clear leadership in this revolution in 2018, at least on the surface, and that may be intentional and an advantage for the people. There's no single leader to be assassinated. All that said, even though much behavior seen in these rallies seem to be improvised and leader-free, there may be certain unseen forces giving some guidelines to some factions, some green lights here and there. And even if they're supported by the Saudis or Israeli or anything, more power to them. I don't think that's a bad thing. I think people of Iran need to clearly ask America and Israel for help. And until it happens, Iranians are not going to be too successful. We need to become a friendly nation. We need to learn to be friendly. Words, language are what distinguishes us from animals. In fact, some animals learn a few words that we tell them. They learn a few words. Gorillas that can communicate with us. When my dogs go and get trapped in a bedroom or outside, and they don't say anything, and they're just whimpering and crying, I have tried to teach them, bark, and I will come and help you. Just bark. And you know what? One or two of them have learned. When they get locked out, they bark. They didn't used to for years. They would suffer outside for an hour. And that's what we human beings need to learn. If there's anything to be learned about from Rumi, is his emphasis on language and the fact that so much of our misunderstanding is over languages. having different languages, not being able to communicate, not being able to understand each other. This government has a lot of enemies. The Western media does not seem to be well versed on Iran affairs. I am shocked. Again, we are missing something, the analog of Al Jazeera, and it seems like there are not enough reporters from CNN and so forth on the ground in Iran to try to figure out what's going on. We're just sitting back lazy overseas and just thinking, okay, yeah, people send video clips. You see the video clips on YouTube. That's it. That tells you what's happening. That's not right. Iranians are in dire need of their own Al Jazeera and in dire need of help. And there's nothing wrong with America helping them. The following hashtags, I'm going to include some hashtags for you in case you want to follow the events. A lot of people in Arab countries are following. Some of them are happy, some are not. But a lot of them are cheering that, damn, people of Iran are doing something against this evil virus that's taken over that country. Bottom line, we need to understand what this regime is all about. They try to play the good dog, bad dog with us, and we shouldn't fall for that. Over and over, the good dogs have proven to be BS artists, people who are just pretending. They want to have people, they want to have the foreign countries in their hands. They want to continue. The more they continue, they can rip off the land. They can rip off the people. They can have once you get addicted to billion-dollar contracts, it's very difficult to let go. It's very difficult to let go and say, and because these people have so much money in their accounts, they're not going to wait till the last minute and fight to the last drop. They're going to get out. They're going to run away. They're afraid. They want their money and they want their lives, and they've been fighting for it forever, and they're going to get out. And that's a good thing, because that means there's going to be a vacuum in leadership and people may be able to do something. And then again, the Western countries need to help Iranians freeze their assets. And after the revolution, we need a group of 1,000 Iranian engineers. There's tons of Iranians all over the globe and inside Iran, very educated people. Send them to small towns all over. Try to be on top of things. Try to cooperate with people. Try to run things. Try to prevent attacks. Don't let it be like another Kabul. Have smart people all over. Watch everything and prevent terrorist attacks. Again, the dictator club is gonna try to help its members. They want Syria to, be in this mess. They want Iran not to succeed. They want Kabul to have explosions. This cannot go on. This cannot go on, and we need to prevent that. I'm neither a leftist or a rightist. I'm not a fan of Trump exactly, but I'm not a fan of Obama either. I think they both have good and bad things, and over and over I say, if people have their own model of what the world is, and if you had the genes of Ayatollah Khomeini and you grew up under those circumstances and you were told these things and you grew up with that kind of mentality, you would probably behave in that way too. It is proven, physicists prove to us that this world is deterministic, but the fact that you and I can come together, make this video, and try to connect and try to make change for the better, that is part of the whole scheme too. That is part of the whole scheme too. What has caused me to do this and what is causing you to react? It's the series of it's the integral, it's the accumulation of all the things that we have heard, seen, experienced that makes us feel like, I think this is the right thing to do. I think Iranians can set a great example for the people of North Korea. They can set a great example for Russians, for any country, for any of the members of the dictator club. If this revolution succeeds, we have shown Iranians put their name in history as a country that started a cascade of revolutions. In fact, a similar thing happened in 1908. If you follow the events, the Russo-Japanese War in the early 1900s, and there was a cascade of revolutions, and Iran was one of the early ones, 1908. A whole bunch of revolutions in Asia, in in the Middle East and all over. And why not? Bottom line, the earth we live in, we don't have to think too much about what's going on outside the earth. Leave that to scientists. Everything that happens on earth stays on earth. Earth receives only gravity and radiation from the sun and other planets, very minute amount from other planets. The world has multiple meanings in different languages. Two meanings, one meaning the earth and one meaning the universe. We need to focus on this planet, and half of this planet is bone dry. Starts from North Africa, west side of North Africa, goes all the way through the Middle East, goes through Iran. By the time it gets to Iran, it becomes all mountains, rocky mountains. Afghanistan is all rocky mountains, and it continues all the way to Western Asia. The earth is not all beautiful and handy-dandy, and the climate has been changing. People have been suffering, not just in the past 100 years, for thousands of years. People have been grilled on this planet, and we need to help each other. We need to understand that we're all human beings. We're all a bunch of nervous systems. It doesn't matter what I look like or what the color of my skin is. What matters is, what is my nervous system? What is your nervous system? How can we come to a mutual understanding? And how can we make the planet a better place? How can we make the planet a better place? Thank you, and I will include this text in the video description, and I'll look forward to hearing from you guys. Anything pro and con, anything you have to say, I'm all ears. And I give you the right, and I do not blame you, because you cannot blame him. I cannot blame Putin. If you had gone through everything that Putin did, you would become somebody like Putin. I cannot blame the police for killing someone by mistake. If you had gone through that training, if you had had that background, if you were given that protocol, that would have happened too. We need to debug the operating system that's governing different countries and the operating system that is governing us. We need to debug the police protocol to prevent such events. We need to begin debugging our ways of thinking. We can improve it. We can improve it. We can improve it. Thank you.